So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this very last webinar of the Books Known Only by Title series. My name is Ingeborg, and I will chair the session this evening, or morning, or day. The Books Known Only by Title webinar series is organized by the research project Books Known Only by Title, exploring the gendered structures of the first Millennium Imagined Library. And this is the 2020/2021 Humanities Project at the Center for Advanced Study at the Norwegian Academy of Science and Letters in Oslo, Norway, and directed by Marianne Kartzow and me. So this webinar series has been running since November last year, and today's event is the 9th in the row. And we've had some really amazing, fantastic webinars, I would say. I'm deeply grateful to all the stellar participants who have made the webinars both interesting and fun, and also to those of you in attendance who have made your presence felt through the chat and the Q&A function. I really have to say that you have made us feel that there is indeed a community out there, and this has made a huge difference for us in Oslo in a time of lockdown. So feel free to say hi in the chat. It would be nice to hear from you. So the topic of today's webinar is books and rumors of books, and we're heading for a great finale. We have the most amazing lineup of speakers: Årstein Justnes, Marianne Kartzow, Karen King, and Seth Sanders. We'll hear about rumors of new Dead Sea Scrolls, the functions of books you have only heard about but never read. These are talked about books. The extravagant multitudes of heretical books and what they had before the rumors of books even started. So in the abstract of this webinar, we said the following, and I'll read the abstract. Knowledge of books comes in many forms. Some books are known intimately as extant texts from start to finish. Others exist only in the abstract, known through rumor and hearsay. Still other books may exist, but grapple with an imposed reputation, categorized as gnostic, heretical, apocryphal, or old wives' tales. Yet even rumors of books are worthy of study, and they represent the focus of this final panel in the Books Known Only by Title series. How do rumors of books affect us, inspiring yearning, discomfort, or even trepidation? How have rumored books shaped the literary landscape of the past and present? The drive to bring these books into existence has led to new literary creations and to forgeries in the past and present, but even those forgeries help to explicate the literary desires and imaginations of their creators. Conversely, when books are genuinely extant, they are still shaped by rumor and expectation. How do these reputations shape scholars' interpretations of ancient and often fragmentary texts? The panel's focus on rumors of books is polyvalent. It encompasses ancient rumored books, texts known only by title, as well as the modern rumors of old manuscripts hidden in caves and vaults that have inspired both collectors and popular literature. It also includes rumors about books, questioning how much of our hermeneutic is shaped by what we expect a given text to be and do. Panelists will explore these topics within a broader understanding of books as talked about entities that signify in their own right. So I suppose that many of you know the drill already. We'll start with the four panelists. Each of them will present a 10 minutes paper, and we're moving directly from one to the next. And then we'll have ample time for questions and discussion at the end of the session. Esther, is there something you would like to add before we start?
Just as always, to please use the Q&A as you are thinking up questions. Chat tends to move quickly sometimes and questions may get lost. So please just make sure you click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask your questions. And if you do have any technical trouble on this final panel, please feel free to message me.
Thank you. So let's get started. Our first speaker today is Årstein Justnes of the University of Agder, Norway. Årstein spent time with us in Oslo in August and September last year and shared several things we did not know about lost, yearned for, and miraculously appearing Dead Sea Scrolls. Today, he'll share this knowledge with all of us. Take it away, Årstein.
Thank you, Ingeborg. I'm always afraid when I see a screen to share some private notes or something, but I think it should be good. Okay, so here we go. Let me start this short presentation with some words of thanks. I just have to say that it has been a joy and a true pleasure to be part of this project. And as you just heard, I was in Oslo in September and October, and I really enjoyed every minute of it. So I want to start and thank Liv Ingeborg and Marianne. Thank you for being so lovely, compassionate, and kind. And I have to say, you were like that constantly, almost from moment to moment. Thank you so much for combining excellence and compassion. But now let's talk about rumors of Dead Sea Scrolls in the 21st century. I want to start with my favorite rumor, I have to say, and that is from Paige Patterson, president of Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. And it's actually a rumor about the Dead Sea Skull. Tests are underway to determine whether 2 additional fragments, including one written on a man's skull, were part of the Dead Sea Scrolls found in the Qumran caves east of Jerusalem. But let us start in 2001 with a press conference at New York Public Library. And this is a picture of Emanuel Tov 20 years ago. On this press conference in 2001, Emanuel Tov is proud because he has really good news. I'm pleased to be able to announce to you that the publication of the Dead Sea Scrolls has been completed. Yes, it is now a fact and it deserves to be broadcast loud and clear. After 54 years of excitement, expectation, tribulation, much criticism, and a little praise, the publication has been finalized. This is in 2001, and Tov proclaims that all the Dead Sea Scrolls are now published, at least more or less all of them. 1 year later, there is an interview with a Norwegian collector, Martin Skøyen, in Biblical Archaeology Review. An enthusiastic Herschel Shanks writes, I think it's already in introduction. If you have a Dead Sea Scroll for sale, you should get in touch with Martin Skøyen in Oslo. He's a prime prospect. He already owns several Dead Sea Scrolls fragments, making him one of the few individuals in the world, I can think of only one other, who owns Dead Sea Scrolls material. Skøyen cannot dismiss the idea that there may yet be some scrolls locked away in a vault, increasing in value each passing days. Soon after that interview, scroll fragments start to appear. Already in 2003, collector William Kando sends 4 small fragments out of Israel in March 2003. And in 2004, Jim Davila writes this on his blog, and it's news about a new Enoch fragment. Yesterday evening at the Qumran session, Esther and Hanan Eshel gave an impromptu presentation on the new Enoch fragment, whose story broke on Paleo-Judaica some time ago. It's a new fragment from Enoch with insights that Lawrence Duckenburg wrote about in the discoveries in the Judean desert. So you can see honorable mention of Lawrence Duckenburg as well here. The fragments belong to the Kando family. Kando was an antiquities dealer who brokered the original Dead Sea Scrolls acquisition. The Enoch papyrus is one of 12 unpublished fragments owned by them. The Eschels have seen infrared photos of 6 of them. 5 are biblical fragments from 3 already known manuscripts. And this Enoch fragment does not come alone. There are also rumors of another fragment. There are rumors that another fragments of the same manuscript exist, and this is in 2004. In 2007, Christian Brady has this report from the IOSOT conference. Today, James Charlesworth presented an image of a fragment in two parts that he acquired on the 25th of October 2006. He says it had been in Zurich since the 50s and reportedly came from Kondo. And you see that it's probably not Jesus Christ, it has to be Charles, but still he believes it was found in the caves of the Dead Sea region. He wants scholars to report that he has tried to prove that it is a fake, and he has been unable. He has been able to do so. He asserts that it is authentic. He also announced that he has acquired another 30 fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they will be made available soon. In 2007, there is an article in Biblical Archaeology Review about 35 scrolls still in private hands. And I quote from Charlesworth again, it is often said that all the Dead Sea Scrolls have now been published. This is inaccurate. As long as 10 years ago, I knew of more than 35 Dead Sea Scrolls that are still in private hands, purchased decades earlier. I published 2 of them in Discoveries in the Judean Desert and will soon announce the recovery of a fragment of Genesis. And in 2009, from a Marav article, he published here a new fragment from Deuteronomy with a sensational reading. The fragment of Deuteronomy was among at least 40 unknown Qumran fragments that I have examined in Europe. And some of them are with those who are now making them available to all. These fragments were sent out of Israel in the 50s and 60s. They were selected by the Arabs for saving because of their importance. So you can see the number keeps increasing. And these new fragments are not only Dead Sea Scrolls, but they are especially important Dead Sea Scrolls. In 2011, Weston Fields has a lecture at Lanier Theological Seminary. And his lecture, his topic is the Dead Sea Scrolls, the significance of recent developments, but already in the introduction, he is focusing on the new fragments and rumors about them. Tonight that we sit there, about 4 hours away driving in Dallas, Fort Worth, there are 8 fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls locked in a safe at the Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. In Oklahoma City tonight, there are another 8 fragments locked in a safe at the headquarters of Hobby Lobby. And then 50 miles north of Norway, so that's really going north, 50 miles north of Norway on a deserted, very deserted farm, desolate, I should say, maybe, there are another 30 fragments of Dead Sea Scrolls locked in a safe on the campus of Azusa Pacific University in Los Angeles. There are 5 more fragments locked in the rare book room in the library, of the library. And in Zurich, Switzerland, in a bank vault, there are an unknown number of Dead Sea Scrolls fragments locked in a safe. Now you may ask, how has all this happened? I just mentioned more than 50 fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls that were unknown less than a decade ago, and many of them unknown 2 years ago, and still a group in Zurich in a vault. And we don't know how many are there. I've seen photographs of a lot of them. I've seen partial photographs of a lot of them. I've gotten description I set with with William Kondo just a week ago, Tuesday in Jerusalem, and he described to me some of the fragments that he still has in the vault. And we don't know, for who knows, maybe years, how many more fragments are going to come out. And among the fragments that are in the vault in Switzerland is a piece of Genesis. It's 3 columns, 22 lines to the columns. It's Genesis 37. And the new lowered sales price lowered from 50 million to 42 million. And it's still sitting in a vault in Zurich. So meantime in Zurich, this is what is going on here. A lot of rumors about Dead Sea Scrolls, and really to buy and publish the rumored scrolls become the core activity of the Dead Sea Scrolls Foundation that founded the official series of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Some of the early Dead Sea Scrolls were never published, and some of them were inadequately published. In addition, since 1998, at least 80 previously unknown fragments have been sold or put up for sale. And these all need to be published. The Dead Sea Scrolls Foundation and the Brill publisher have inaugurated a new official series to continue the former series, Discoveries in the Judean Desert. And you can see in 2016, 2017, the number increases to 150 previously unknown scrolls. And I need to go to my conclusion. There are so much fun here. Back in 1993, Skøyen visited Old Kando in his shop. And he asked if he could buy Dead Sea Scrolls, but the answer he got was short and gruff. Those days are gone. There were no scrolls in 1993. This was his final word on the matter. He passed away a month later at the age of 83. So some concluding remark. What I have been telling you this last 11 minutes, I can see it's a mainstream scholarly practice in the field of Dead Sea Scrolls, and I'm included in this. Rumors and lies have been accepted as provenance, and elements from the first stories are resources in the reconstruction of bullshit provenances like Arabs, Bedouin, Kando. The function of these rumors is that they bring the story of the Dead Sea Scrolls up to date, so to speak, and it put the messenger, that is the scholar most often, in the spotlight, and it creates a yearning in the markets, and it prepares the way for new manuscript and fragments. These so-called post-2002 fragments were probably all fakes, or perhaps over 90% were fakes. They were small, they looked not that great, but they came with great stories. But it's important to stress that they have made it into the Dead Sea Scrolls dataset, and many of them are even in Emanuel Torv's authoritative revised list. You find them in numerous publications about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you even find them in accordance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Årstein. We'll move directly on to the next speaker, which is Marianne Kartzow of the University of Oslo, and my dear fellow professor known by title, and only by title, in fact, at the Books Not Only by Title project. So Marianne is, in fact, nothing less than an expert on rumors, because rumors were the topic of her PhD thesis back in the early 2000s, no less than that. The floor is yours, Marianne.
Thank you so much, Ingeborg. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's good to be here with all of you. And I'm going to talk about books and their potential psychological and social functions. So a rumor has it that a colleague has spotted a rubric in a medieval Hebrew manuscript reading Eldad and Modad, but the observation remains uncertain, as it was made in passing while looking for something else, and the identity of the manuscript has been lost to oblivion. A nice little surprise may be in store for us in the vault of the British Library, but until the yearning for it becomes unbearable and someone goes hunting for it, Eldad and Modad remains, for now, a book known only by title. So why is it that rumors and gossip fill us with satisfaction and good emotions, and often spread so fast? Scholars hunting for lost books and manuscripts become as curious and happy when secrets or news are offered as normal people who read about celebrities or royalties. If Eldad and Modad is more than a title mentioned in the Shepherd of Hermas and later book lists, if the written text actually is to be found somewhere, I will be the first to announce it. Because I entered into the field, as Ingeborg said, of biblical studies through rumors and gossip. My dissertation was about gossip and gender in the pastoral epistles. I employed contemporary theories about how rumors, reputation, and gossip functioned in the ancient world, and paid attention to how the pastoral Paul employed overall gendered discourses to distinguish his own correct teaching from others' false teaching. In particular, it was women and other second-class people, such as slaves or children, who were blamed for being gossipy, although the male householders indeed needed the information circulated in the intersectional gossip network to survive and to secure their own reputation. One rhetorical device I identified in the pastoral epistles was how accusations of gossip work to question the masculinity of the opponents as a way of feminizing and devaluating. So being an expert in gossip and rumors, in theory that is, I'm fascinated by how the mentioning or hinting at a book, what we have coined title dropping, just a moment. Title dropping works to generate interest and engagement. As name dropping, title dropping gives an aura of importance, network, and connections. To talk about a book that no one ever saw or read, as if it is something you have in your own library, that is tickling in the air, to employ an expression of shame from the pastoral epistles. I possess it, I've read it, I can refer to it or quote it, and this makes me worth listening to. I know this book, but you don't. So also with rumors of lost books and found manuscripts today. If I think I saw something in a vault or dared meeting someone under a bridge in the dark, it helps. Some specific discourses of masculinity and colonialism can be surrounded rumored books. The eagerness to find what is lost, to control the source material, and to fill in the gaps in the archives of the past have been an important task for scholars with a certain class, race, and gender profile. So a talked about book is as real as a real book. There are so many ways to know about a book. You can have seen it, read it, heard it, or heard it interpreted. We also need to include that you can have heard about it. A rumor has it. Such books, however, are surrounded with a different set of emotions. And I want to spend some time to expand on the affective side of books and rumors of books, and then employ Eldad and Modad as a case study. Cognitive theories argue that thoughts and other mental activities play an essential role in forming emotions. It's crucial to recognize that power is first and foremost what Sarah Ahmed calls an affective economy, rather than a set of ideas. Affective theory helps us avoid the linguistic fallacy, believing that power is primarily conducted by thoughts and language. Rather, power feels before it thinks. It is not the result of our rational consciousness, but it's much more instinctive and unfiltered. Affect is the name we give to those forces generally other than conscious knowledge. Affect is in many ways synonymous with forces of encounter. Rumors of books obviously fill important functions, psychologically and social, with intersecting power aspects regardless of context. In the ancient world, with a different level of literacy, with a different book culture, rumors of books could generate emotional capital. It gave a certain insider position, power and authority, a sense of secrecy and surprise to talk about a book no one ever had read. In a different context, still with some striking parallels. Today, new findings may bring sensation to the field and increase status and prestige in the academic world, so obsessed with novelty and innovation as we all are. The frustrating lack of ancient sources and gaps in the archives have led creative souls among us to invent or create some new sources to hold the interest warm or to be considered forefront, productive, and interesting in an increasingly competitive environment. As I told you, I am tempted to believe in our colleague who probably have seen Eldad and Modad, and if I ever find it, I can't wait for the pleasure to announce it for you. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but it keeps scholarship alive. So, according to the psychologist Sylvan Tompkins, there are 9 primary affects, which he categorizes into positive, neutral, and negative, to employ some basic theories. Those he calls positive or neutral effects are enjoyment, joy, interest, excitement, or surprise, startle. All have to do with reactions to what is new and give us pleasure and satisfaction. They make us smile, move our eyes or eyebrows, and listen attentively. Exactly these positive affects tend to come when we share rumors and gossip. It may fill us with joy and be entertaining. We want to share, we pay special attention, and we are surprised and ask for more. Really? What? Tell me more. It is indeed tickling in the air. So let us now in more detail look at one example of an ancient title dropping. It is located in a complex, apocalyptic, and affective web. In the opening visions of the Shepherd of Hermas, a divine female character, the Lady Church gives a whole set of revelations and instructions to Hermas, a former slave. She is indeed a book lady, holding a book, reading from a book, asking Hermas to copy from her book, as well as edit it later. She also talks about books, such as the Book of Life and another little book, and she mentions a book known only by title. The already many times mentioned Eldad and Modad. And in her vision, she speaks to Hermas and says, "The Lord is near to those who return, as it is written in Eldad and Modad, who prophesied in the wilderness to the people," end quote. And here we have a photo of them, if you also want to look at that. So readers who encounter this sentence in the Shepherd of Hermas will search in vain for the quote's context, as Eldad and Modad does not survive today as an extant text. With the exceptions of the 4 Greek words that the Shepherd of Hermas presents as a quote from that book, we know Eldad and Modad only by title. We do not know whether a book by the name of Eldad and Modad ever existed as an extant and available text, or what that hypothetical text contained, although it is also named in some Greek, Church Slavonic, and Armenian lists of books. However, what we do know is that a book ascribed to the 2 elders mentioned in Numeri 11:26-29 figures as a book within a book, a named and conceived literary object embedded in another work. The Lady Church title drops. She employs the affective capital of a rumored book in her dialogue with Hermas. And by help of this book, known only by title, her genealogy of knowledge and tradition is secured, and she is placed in line with male authorities of the past. To mention this book safeguards her, contribute to construct her as proper and acceptable as one who exclusively knows a book unread by others. It adds to her gender capital and to her authority that she is associated with this book. She is the exceptional female at the male side of the gender continuum, confirming also when she elsewhere instructs Hermas, a former slave of a woman, to better masculinize himself. So in the same section, just a few lines after, another angel figure appears in a fascinating little dialogue. And this angel, he asked Hermas who he thinks the Lady Church is, with the book in her hand, so active in revelation and prophecy. Hermas, he suggests she is the Sibyl. And this is the first time in the Christian source that the Sibyl is mentioned. Apparently for Hermas, that is for whoever constructed this fictional autobiographic narrative, the Lady Church appears in these scenes in a way that resembles the Sibyl. The right answer, however, is no, you are wrong. She is not the Sibyl. She's the Church, created before everything, and that is why she is old. The vision has it. So in these 2 dialogues, first with the lady and Hermas, and then now with this angel and Hermas, books and rumors of books serve the function of distinguishing right from wrong, true from false, with all the emotions that come with such concepts. Books and their associates, and here it is Eldad and Modad and the Sibyl, are symbols of authority, or the lack thereof, for the Lady Church along gender lines. The rumored book of the male Jewish prophets of the past represents an acceptable line of tradition, while the Sibyl does not. Although the Lady Church is a female figure like the Sibyl, she is different. She belongs to the male line of books and knowledge of books, including here a rumored book. She was created first. Hermes is accordingly taught by the divine figures of these visions that books belongs to an intersecting web of authority, of age, gender, and status, surrounded by a complex set of effects. Books can be better than their reputations, but sometimes the only way we know of a book is through reputation and rumors. They are still alive and productive, like Eldad and Modad. This imagined book serves important functions in the dialogue of Hermes by creating acceptable genealogies along intersecting lines, in contrast to the archetypical female book figure, the Sibyl. To mention a title of an unknown book can create curiosity and respect in the past and in the present. So I hope we soon again will be told by someone who has heard it from someone that a lost or unknown book has been found. We need some breaking news soon, offering us surprise, enjoyment, and excitement. And until then, we have to control our emotions, whether on Zoom, here in Oslo at the Center for Advanced Studies, under a dark bridge, in the walls of a famous library, or, as rumor has it, in the near future at a conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Thank you. So our third speaker this evening is Karen King of Harvard University. For decades, Karen has been a major voice in the field, and I am so very proud to have you on board today. The title of Karen's talk is Books and Rumors of Books in Orthodoxy Heresy Discourse, Affect and Effects. Welcome.
Thank you so very much. It's such a great pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the invitation and your very kind introduction. I am going to talk about Orthodoxy Heresy Discourse, which might be a surprise to no one who knows my work. The title of this final panel, indeed, Books and Rumors of Books, led me immediately to think of Matthew 24:6, 24:4-6, where the disciples, where Jesus warns them, beware that no one leads you astray. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, books and rumors of books, wars and rumors of wars, but the end is not yet. So a century or so later, the end had still not arrived. But for Irenaeus, the battle was certainly raging. Heretics were leading many astray, he claimed, and he wrote a 5-volume work with the aim of convincing believers to heed the Lord's advice to beware. Echoing 1 Timothy, he says, certain people, are discarding the truth and introducing deceitful myths and endless genealogies. Irenaeus has no doubt that he has identified at least some of them. He goes on not only to describe their false teachings and perverse interpretations of scriptures, but to allude to the books they write. Some by title only, sometimes a brief characterization or quote, sometimes merely by avidly asserting that multitudes of such writings are being circulated. Wars and rumors of wars have become materialized and are circulating in books and rumors of books, not only in the writings that Irenaeus and other heresiologists decry, but in their own books against them. Why are books, inscribed material artifacts, so important in this battle? Well, we could name a number of reasons. Books are mobile and replicable, tools or even agents of communication, artifacts able to cover time and territory well beyond that of human life. And they are able to function both as links and as highly stable nodes in networks of dispersed early Christian groups. These qualities certainly are relevant, but they are not, I think, sufficient to account for the role they play in Orthodoxy heresy discourse. And Irenaeus himself is not innocent in centralizing written artifacts at the core of early Christian engagements over diversity and difference. We have in Irenaeus the clearest statement of what will become central strategies for the framing of discourses of orthodoxy and heresy. Let me get you down here we show, let's see, where are we? Yes, that's where I want it to be. Okay. He sets out a particular narrative, an apostolic lineage, a rule of faith, and a fourfold gospel. The entanglement of these with each others, the declaration that they constitute a single, uniform, and unified whole, is such that the invocation of one draws the others with it synecdochally. Heresy, of course, is framed oppositionally. Deviation from this narrative, acting outside of the established order of authoritative leadership, promoting teachings or interpretations of scriptures different from those of the rule of faith, and composing, reading, teaching, preserving, passing on other gospels than the four, are also linked. They define false belief and practices, group schism, heretical persons, eschatological perdition, and inscribed artifacts, a unitary, unified whole. Now, as Ellen Muhlenberger said in her fascinating presentation earlier this year on the 3 chapters controversy at the Council of 553, let me quote, men, their words, and their texts are a fuzzy though unified ontological entity, end quote. In the work of Irenaeus, I want to argue a similar assumption of ontological, epistemological, and material entanglement undergirds the rhetorical logic of orthodoxy heresy discourse. The very mention of spurious writings and speech brings simultaneously into the playing field the people who composed, read, taught, or circulated them, the beliefs, the demonic falsehoods, the immoral practices, and cosmology, the battle of God and Satan. At stake in all of this is salvation or perdition for individuals or for groups. So let me illustrate briefly how this entanglement works in Irenaeus's thought. For time, we're going to miss out on the gospel of truth, which is really cool, okay? And I'm going to go to this longer quote about the followers of Marcus. Here he writes about them. I'm going to let you read while I go through this. Note how this passage unfolds rhetorically. First, Irenaeus emphasizes the overwhelming surplus of heretical writings, an indication of the heretics' lack of proper restraint. He characterizes their writings as apocryphal and spurious, but notice how he merges those writings with the people, the Marcosians, who, like their writings, are frauds with intent to deceive. Now, Irenaeus also directs an affective response. To react with awe is to be duped, to be foolish and ignorant. And so to imagine oneself in this position seems aimed to elicit immediate repulsion from his readers, and perhaps even anger at the implied shame. Note too, the contrast between graphe and grammata. Graphe are apocryphal and counterfeit. Indeed, they're bastards, nothoi, roguish frauds. Grammata are authentic writings. They're also spoken letters, written letters of the alphabet, associated with the simplicity of a child learning from his teacher. Heretics, however, have transformed this simple lesson into Jesus's revelation of the unknowable one. Part of what's interesting to me here is that Irenaeus provides no argument against this view. Rather, the contrastive associations are sufficient to insinuate and affectively sway the reader toward rejecting this false teaching, or rather rejecting this teaching as false. Irenaeus does not seem to need actually to cite a text or to refute the Marcosian interpretation. He has only to allege that there are books containing falsehood circulating everywhere, heedlessly doing Satan's work, rumors of bookish bastards without name or legitimacy. And in the absence of actual books or titles of books, these rumors are doing the rhetorical work of refutation. We could turn to another example, the Gospel of Judas, but sadly, time not permitting, we're going to move on, okay? And here I want to move on to the question about gender, because Irenaeus states that the battle is one of truth versus error. But is there, so to speak, a battle of the sexes going on as well? Already in the preface to the first book, he draws on allusions to 1 Timothy that apply female gendered imagery to discredit the moral and rational character of those he considers to be heretics. And here I hear my presentation and that of Marianne's, brushing up against each other, maybe rumbling into each other, maybe sailing along together down the same stream. I'm not sure, we'll see. But he begins the entire work, of course, with the reference to 1 Timothy 1-4. Certain people, he writes, let's see, I am not where I say, here we go. Certain people, Irenaeus writes, are discarding the truth and introducing deceitful myths and endless genealogies, which, as the apostle says, promotes speculations rather than divine training and discipline that is in faith. This is followed only a few sentences later by a suggestive gendered description of error, which of course is plane, is in the feminine. I, of course, translated this, as you will notice in reading it, over-translated the grammatical gender of plane as feminine, but I think not wrongly so. Irenaeus has just cited 1 Timothy to refer to heretics, and now it seems he's referring to 1 Timothy chapter 2, which admonishes women of faith to dress modestly and to remain silent. Moreover, he takes his title, The Overthrow of the Refutation of Falsely So-Called Knowledge, okay, from Timothy's final admonition. O Timothy, he says, guard against what has been entrusted to you. Avoid the godless chatter and contradictions of this sort of false knowledge. And here I just want to put in a word of appreciation for Jacqueline Weintraub's insightful remarks at an earlier panel about regimes of truth that entail obedience and preservation. So here too, 1 Timothy is to obey the inscribed author, supposedly the Apostle Paul, and to guard tradition that's passed down. The letter describes the language of false gnosis itself being a grammatically feminine term, as chatter and contradictions, suggesting the kind of female gossipers who say what they should not, that he decries in 1 Timothy 5:13, cautioning that some, quote, have already strayed against Satan. And in 2 Timothy 3, stating clearly that weak women can never arrive at a knowledge of the truth. As Marianne Kartzow's fine study of gossip and gender in the pastoral epistles has shown, this language belongs to ancient discourse that called for the control of women's speech. Here in Irenaeus, we see this discourse deployed to denigrate those the author considers to be heretics, insinuating that they are weak females. The trope of the heretic as female, as someone easily led by Satan, of course, is well studied. What we find here is connection to books, especially to artful and elegant style and persuasive erudition, which Irenaeus implies is wily and deceitful, like female error tricked out in attractive dress. In contrast to his unaffected barbarian simplicity and truth. Elsewhere, I've argued that gender is also a factor in the exclusion of women from legitimate author function. Irenaeus's discourse of orthodoxy and heresy is not gender neutral. That is, insofar as legitimate authors and interpretations of scripture fit the category of apostle, authorized leader, teacher, church father, or ordained clergy, and insofar as women are excluded from these positions, then women cannot legitimately be authors, teachers, interpreters, or preachers of so-called Orthodox literature. As authors, the only the roles of pseudo-epigrapher, forger, heretic are open to them. Similarly, we see bodily affect at work. And here I'm going to defer to Marianne's presentation, but just notice that the bodily affects, okay, incite actual physical reactions in pulse and temperature, in muscle tension or laughter. And these bodily sensations can lead to a sense of reality, and therefore stand in as truth, as proof, as it will, for Irenaeus's rhetoric. If we turn now to actions like burning books, then actions like burning books then can affect not only a ritualized purification of community, but can afford affective relief for oneself, whether of safety, calm, confidence, or the satisfaction of vengeance. And indeed, such rhetoric of books can be matters of life and death. Books and bodies, the books of their authors, could be and were elided. It was then not only books that were burned, that were subject to destruction, but bodies as well. For some, the danger, the miasmic rumor of heretical books, threatening pollution, wrought such anxiety that reading of any other books was condemned. The apostolic constitution commands, quote, abstain from all heathen books. And it cautions that poisonous books written in the name of Christ and his disciples by wicked heretics, they will receive punishment, it affirms, for writings that lead to the seduction and the perversion of the faith. It would seem, however, that not only authors, putative authors, books and putative books receive punishment from God, but those who actually read and preserve them. In this quote, we see that Athanasius, writing against the Arians, claimed that any writing composed by Arius should be handed over to the flames, in order that nothing will be left even to remind anybody of him. His memory will be wiped out. And he's going to make it a public order that if someone should be discovered even hiding such a writing composed by Arius, his penalty will be death. We see more of this in the 4th century. Virginia Burris has argued that the ascetic bishop Priscillian of Avila was condemned, in part because he noticed that scripture itself cited non-canonical writings. And for Priscillian, that authorized the need to read apocryphal books, since something of God's truth could be found among those falsehoods. And indeed, Priscillian argued one ought to read such books, lest Satan's strategy to interpolate falsehood among holy things would be successful. And the result would be seeing the good perish with the very bad. Priscillian was executed. So to conclude, what effects might be there of the role that books play in orthodoxy heresy discourse? Of course, such writings were not mere rumors. We have enough of these books to be certain of that. But the rhetoric of their defamation partook of many characteristics we associate with rumor and gossip: imprecision, doubtfulness, malice, and shaming. It also has stoked, of course, curiosity, imagination, and a lot of labor to fit these books into a story in which they do not necessarily arrive already dressed for fire and brimstone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. Our final speaker today is Seth Sanders of the University of California, Davis. Seth was supposed to be with us in Oslo last autumn, but unfortunately was not able to join us due to the pandemic. And I am so very glad that we get to hear from you today instead. What did they have before they had authors, and what did they have before they had books? So Seth, you have to explain this for us, and I want to know.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank Liv and Marianne for their generosity in inviting me to be part of this, and then assisting me in engaging and participating, to the extent possible from how many thousand miles away are we? Too many. Anyway, so I'm delighted to be a part of this. I'm going to depart a little bit. I'm not going to use a PowerPoint, and I'm going to start this with the existential horror writer Thomas Ligotti from a story called Vastarian. It's a man who's looking for a mysterious book in a bookstore and encounters a crow-like man. And the man says, "Well, you must be looking for something special," he said, replacing the black book on its shelf. "And I know what that's like when you're looking for something very special. Have you ever heard of a book, an extremely special book that is not about something, but actually is that something?" So the goal of this project has been to more brightly illuminate and clearly envision the late antique phenomenon of books known only by title. Today, I want to remark on the productive darkness they emerged from, the strikingly different background of such works in ancient Hebrew and Aramaic. This is a defining problem of biblical literature, which is my main field, though it is usually not very well defined. This is that most works that wound up in the Hebrew Bible were something like the opposite of books known only by title. They are works known by everything but title, or maybe books known only by themselves. Maybe even in the case I'm going to look at, a book that is not about something that actually is that something. So, why were so many ancient Hebrew writers comfortable with intimately knowing and vigorously using works without title or author at all, in our sense? We know that the later Jewish tradition was to use the incipit, hence the terms Bereshit, Shemot, Dvarim, etc. And remarkably, we know that biblical writers were capable of referring to works by title, the Book of the Wars of the Lord, the Book of Yashar, etc., but never for books that were unavailable to them, and rarely for ones that are important to the narrative itself. The Book of Nahum, for example, has two competing colophons, the Matter of Nineveh and the Book of the Vision of Nahum, but neither of those titles, nor even the prophet's name, are referred to anywhere else in the Hebrew Bible. So there's a kind of a triviality or a different function to the title. So I want to think then about why there was so little sense of textual loss represented in the Hebrew Bible in moments like this. After all, this is a society that must have lost many texts. Ancient Israel and Judah went through massive ruptures, had their intelligentsia and scribes killed, abducted, or forced to resettle multiple times. But aside from the myth of the recovery of the Sefer Torah in 2 Kings 22, the contents of which we don't get, although it's implied that it's related to Deuteronomy, there is little concern or interest in lost or missing titles. The Book of Yashar from Joshua 10 and 2 Samuel 1, the Annals of the Kings of Israel or Judah mentioned throughout Kings, are not presented as lost, but assumed to be present, to be readily available. There is no sense of lack compared to the many hidden and lost and then revealed books of Second Temple or early Jewish literature. The lack of ancient Hebrew interest in labeling people as authors is well known, but the accompanying rarity of labeling compositions with titles, of framing them as texts in our terms, is part and parcel, I'd say, of this different way of thinking. Within the narrative worlds of ancient Hebrew literature, just as we find people described as speaker or compiler more often than author, so compositions are often untitled, as in the Pentateuch, or given descriptions rather than titles, where Chazon Yeshayahu, the vision of Isaiah, or Divrei Yirmiyahu, Divrei Amos, function as introductions rather than titles. There are exceptions, though in contrast to the somewhat later Sefer Chazon Nahum, the book of the vision of Nahum, we should probably imagine Isaiah's vision or Jeremiah's words in lowercase, as common nouns rather than proper nouns or names. It may be helpful to relativize our own fixation on this as something of a historical accident. Greek interest in attribution and authorship is related to its peculiar political circumstances of city-states and small-scale competitive networks, whether of poets or mathematicians. Pindar's business model was to be paid for his services, advertised by his poems. Such patterns did not develop in the Near East due to the larger scale and greater consolidation of knowledge. In contrast to the wandering sages of Greece, most Near Eastern wisdom experts worked for the palace. So, if the Greek idea of authored, titled, ownable texts arose from oddities of Greek political economy, did it nonetheless represent the discovery of something ontologically real, the authored text? I think probably not. But the high value we place on both authors and texts has made it difficult to imagine what they valued instead. Cross-historically, as Foucault showed, the author function has never been one thing because neither the human self nor language have been understood in precisely the same way in all times and places. But we haven't made the same inquiry of the idea of the bounded text itself, and the way that life before authorship continues to seem like a blur to us suggests we are still haunted by its ghost. We can better explain the Hebrew Bible's lack of a sense of rupture by focusing on its modes of creating continuity. One good model for looking at the biblical poem, for example, as something other than a bounded text is the book by Jackie Weintraub that I'm very proud to have edited and published. I actually was involved in the title, for what it's worth. Her account of how poetic compositions are framed in ancient Hebrew literature through deliberate artistic choice. These framings are representational devices for making the remote past immediate, not inevitable natural facts of orality or poetry. Within biblical prose narrative, poetry is defined not by its meter, rhythm, or artfulness, but because it is narrated as the performance of a character. We know this framing is a choice because we also find they used other possibilities for defining poetry. In the Psalms and Proverbs, poetry often comes to us in the form of anthologies, not the voice of a character, but the product of a compiler. So Weintraub argues, the staged orality of biblical poetry is no more an objective fact about ancient Hebrew literature than its historical or authorial claims. We can deepen this view of framing compositions rather than titling texts by contrasting it with the Bible's most coherent extended presentation of language, that of the priestly work. The most extensive identifiable element of the Pentateuch, the priestly work provides us with the most extended ritual text from the entire ancient Near East. Its almost fanatical consistency with respect to plot terminology and ideology has compelled a remarkable level of scholarly agreement on its overall shape as the most unified extended piece of biblical literature that we have. Genesis 1 through 2:4a begins both our Bible and the ancient priestly work and sets its tone. Although the narrator is anonymous and invisible, God is the subject and sole agent of every sentence here, as every day is ordered by his speaking. He begins with the jussive, Yehi or, let there be light, then in naming, God called the light day, moving on to an act of blessing in the imperative, Pru revu, be fruitful and multiply, a performative promise, I hereby give you every seed-bearing plant, and concluding with the crowning double pragmatic acts of blessing and sanctifying the Sabbath, the centerpiece of the cosmos. The priestly authors pointedly chose to introduce their vision of God by having him speak and thereby enact an ordered catalog of verb forms and life forms, using a token of every major type of pragmatically marked speech. The priestly creation account thereby claims that God's speech is fully present in Genesis, yet on a radically higher level and separated from a total ontological gulf from human language, which has almost no religious significance or ritual role within priestly discourse. Similarly, in contrast to the later interwoven Sinai story that we now have, the role of language in the priestly version of Revelation is totally different. When Moses approaches the realm of God at Sinai, not a single word of law is given on the holy mountain, and God's sole revelation there causes Moses to see, not hear, a divine visual model of the tent shrine where God is to dwell. This revelation is not an act of law-giving so much as of enabling a material presence that knowing and enacting the law makes possible. So to conclude, there is no reason to believe the priestly work ever had a title. What it claimed instead was presence. Not only does Moses never speak to God during the whole process of the law's revelation, but uniquely among ancient Near Eastern ritual texts, no praise of God accompanies sacrifice in P, and prayer is nearly non-existent. It is instead through signs and bodies that priestly ritual coordinates human action with divine command. The priestly work does not need to frame language for us because after Moses transmitted the commandments, human language no longer really matters, except for that of the priestly work itself that is fully present to us. P tells us not how to speak, but how to act. And it presents itself not as a bounded and entitled text, but as an embodiment of ritual, like the ominous work described in Ligoti's short story that is not about something, but actually is that something. The way so many ancient Hebrew literary works do not receive titles or clear boundaries suggests a lack of the reification that we have become used to. If they are, let's say, sources rather than texts that could be engaged with without adopting the responsibilities or limits of authors or texts, this may help us understand the now shocking liberties that were taken with them up to the early Hellenistic period. For this set of liberties is what we call the process of biblical composition, to which each of the books known only by title is in turn a dialogical response. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really, really great. And thank you for all the panelists for great presentations. There are already some questions waiting for us in the Q&A, and please continue, everyone, to post your comments and questions there. Before we start going through them, though, I would like to ask the panelists if any of you would like to respond or ask questions to any of your co-panelists, please. Anyone? Everything perfectly clear?
No, I think we had a couple. I saw at least one in the Q&A here.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. I was just wondering if any of you had anything you wanted to respond to or ask the others about, and then we'll go to the Q&A.
Oh, well, still thinking about this great stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll move on to the Q&A. Esther, do you have a question for us?
I do. Jeremiah Coogan asks a question for Professor King. Thank you for this rich reading of Irenaeus. I wonder if you might reflect on how Irenaeus's attempts to restrict appropriate author function to particular free elite men fits within larger second century discourses of Roman authorship that restrict auctoritas along gendered and classed lines.
So it seems to me Irenaeus is perfectly in step with his age. You know, and that indeed, you know, he's participating in a kind of performative iteration and reproduction of ancient patriarchal, kyriarchal, and gender norms. What's unusual about this and what's so interesting is that technically it's making the very highest level of the most authoritative capacity to produce divine speech, to be in the sense of a Foucauldian author function, to be the transmitter, okay, from the divine to human beings, not the source, okay, but the one who marks stable transmission is given only to these 12 people plus Paul, and then we start adding in folks and so forth. And then, of course, there's Bart Ehrman's interesting remarks about how much all of these are forgeries. But that restriction to a certain number of named male persons, that's that's a kind of incredible restriction of this. But he's using not the notion of source. So when I think of Foucauldian author function in antiquity, I talk about three functions: source, stable transmission, and positioning. That is setting something in a story, in a place, a physical place, or in a narrative storyline or something. And here the apostles are doing, especially, they're not the source. It's not coming from, they're not God, okay? They're transmitters, okay? But what Irenaeus is doing is he's using them to fit them inside a particular narrative that, again, is tied to, you know, a set of books, to a rule of truth, and so forth. But I think Marianne might have as much or more to say about this as I do. But she does. She's no. She's said about everything she has to say. Yes. Thank you.
Well, we have a question from Christian Bull for Seth, who asks, I wonder whether your Greek/Near East dichotomy is somewhat gainsaid by the example of Egypt, where there is an idea that authors gain immortality by their works. And thank you for a great talk.
Yeah, so the I think that first of all, the it wasn't really intended as an absolute dichotomy where there were no named authors across the entire Near East. Just that there's an a distinctive aspect of Greek authorship related to a competition for fame, and a kind of a political economy of sort of owning text as property. But I'm thinking really more of the really chaotic attitude towards authorship that we find in, we could say the Near East, in terms of Mesopotamia and the Levant, and there may be some distinctive features of Egypt here, which people tend not to see as part of Africa, even though it is. So there may be some other sorts of intersections that are worth talking about there. But for example, in Mesopotamia, you get author lists that say things like, this work was written by Adapa the sage, this one was pronounced by the god Enki, and this one was written by a horse. I mean, that's definitely named authorship, but I think it's probably not doing the same thing. Yeah, so that would be my initial response. And thanks for the question.
Great. So we actually have another question for Seth, this time from Alan Cooper, who asks, how do you explain the relationship between the Pentateuch and Psalm 90, the prayer of Moses, in terms of authorship and authority, the diminution of the role of human authorship because it might distract from the authority of the discourse?
Yeah, so this is the one that just begins a prayer of Moses, the man of God. It's not, you mean in terms of ascribing it to Moses. I see what you're getting at. Yeah, that it's actually ascribed to Moses, and it's just said LaMoshe, or excuse me, Tfilat Moshe, in the same way as you get, Mizmor LeDavid, a Psalm of David. And if one was, logically, you'd think that if the stuff of the Pentateuch is all Moses material, then why isn't the psalm that's attributed to Moses in the Pentateuch? And one could answer this in a conventional way by saying, well, the people who are collecting the Psalms want to find people to attribute it to, and this one happened to get Moses' name stuck to it. But I think more importantly, and I'll just briefly say, the whole mechanism of pushing something into the remote past and away from the present speaker is one of the most primal ways that religious language gains authority, is by being authorless, timeless, and placeless, and retrojected into the distant past. One thing that a further conversation would get into, that of course we don't have time for here, is the fact that there's an opposite strategy you see in American evangelical religion, for example, where people emphasize it's me speaking to you here and now in everyday conventional language. So one of them, you could say, focalizes the discourse or the work itself as a way of gaining authority. The other one focalizes the individual human being. Those are two poles of this larger scheme of religious language, and I think that that's one way to place the whole thing. But thank you.
Thank you. So we have more questions coming in. Great question from Rebecca Solovog. I'm interested in the intersection between King's and Kartzow's presentation concerning gender and authorship. Can women only claim authorship through heresy?
Okay, Karen, who wants to start?
Oh, I think you need to start, Marianne.
Well, thank you so much. Great question. You know, I have to. I think the case from Shepherd of Hermas is extremely interesting, because there you have this extremely female character, which is a divine church image, and she is actually presented in all steps of a book person. She's, you know, she's reading the book, she's holding the book, she's doing everything in the book. The thing is she actually an author of the book? I'm not sure what an author is seriously in this context, but at least that comes to my mind as one example of where this presumed line is breaking, where it's not only like the pastoral epistles like Irenaeus, where it's female body, books, heresy, wrong side. I think there are some exceptions in this. That's just the example I came up with.
Yeah, I think it is this question of what is an author, you know, which Foucault raised for us and really helped so helpfully problematize, you know, has led me to quit using the term for antiquity, because it imports with it so many modern conceptualizations from you know, printing press to, you know, owning copyrights to capitalist things, to the limitation of its to the assumption of copyright and fixity of text. So to talk about attribution, and then if one talks about attribution and uses his notion that attribution can be spread throughout a text, you know, and I've done this with, for example, for the Apocalypse of John and for the Apocryphon of John, or for a text like the Gospel of Mary, for example. So the attribution there is titularly at the end of the text. Okay, the Gospel of Mary, only in the Coptic. It's not at all clear that it's in the Greek manuscript. But there, attribution works with regard to, I would say, the Gospel of John. That is to say, this text positions the text in the story of the Gospel of John as you know, that moment between when Jesus says to Mary, "Go and tell my disciples, I have not yet ascended, but I am ascending." And I wrote to her, and she goes and tells them that in the Gospel of Mary, the line is that she met the risen Jesus. He said, "I'm not yet ascending." He went up, he came back. He obviously came back because he appears to the disciples like a couple of verses later, right? But in between, she has another encounter with him. And in all of this, she has received teaching from him, okay, that the other disciples don't know. And they ask for in this text. They say, "What do you know that we don't know?" etc. And she gives them this teaching about the ascent of the soul, which of course is perfect to fit into what Jesus has been up to. Okay, he's been ascending, now he's back, he can tell us. Okay, so here's a case where attribution to Mary is not about authorship in some sense of source. It's really, she is the recipient of revelation from Christ, and she has received this special revelation. Okay, and it is used to situate the entirety of the Gospel of Mary within the narrative frame of the Gospel of John, within a larger frame. So if we think about it like that, then we see often, and I think the Shepherd of Hermas might be really interesting to think about this way too. You know, what roles, okay, of attribution, source, stable transmission, you know, situating functions, can women play? And then I think we'll see them all over the place. Irenaeus is trying to limit those, okay? Because he's got some problem with this whole bunch of people who are writing books that he doesn't like, and ideas, you know, and so he's using, I think in the way I suggested, I think that's worth talking about, you know, to limit that. And that limits women's roles really, really sharply. But that's not true for what we see in early Christian literature more broadly, I would say.
So I think what I've learned is that we have to think much broader than these modern categories, and just think about women books, and then open up all the different levels and all the different steps. That's at least my solution to that, I think.
Yeah, and I think getting out of books in our sense of written artifacts too is copyrighted, fixed, etc. things.
It's a conceptual work there.
Yeah, see them as these, you know, oral things written down, edited, passed on, changed, all the kind of work that's going on around written artifacts in this period. And where are the women? You know, we know that Origin tells us there were women scribes. Okay, what were they up to? You know, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
So I think, well, we are running out of time, but this is the last webinar. So I think we can do 5 minutes more. So Esther, do you have like one more question for Årstein? I know there are several, so you have to make some choices.
Right, I have the hard part of picking among 4 excellent questions.
Pick an easy one.
No.
So let's go with Carla Sulzbach's question. She asks, what do you make of the end of the Copper Scroll, which says, in the cavern of the presence on the north of Kol Yit, its opening is north and tombs are at its mouth, a duplicate of this document and the interpretation, a reference to a scroll with no name, a case of Qumran title dropping. Thank you, Marianne. And thank you for your great talk.
Oh, thank you, Carla, for your kind words and for your interesting question. Honestly, I read this text for the first time, and I really don't know what to make of it. But I can tell you a couple of stories from a vault I have in Switzerland. No, I'm just joking. No, but I would just take this as an observation, and I have to study this more carefully.
Thank you.
Okay, and I think that by those words well, the thing is that I don't want us to really end. So what I would like to do is there are a few people I really have to thank before we end it. The first one I really need to express my deep gratitude to is Esther Brownsmith. She has served as the technical host of all of these webinars in this series. And Esther also been like a very important person in making all the abstracts that we have introduced the webinars with, and she has done a large share of the work behind the scene. So there would really be no webinar series without you. So thank you so much, Esther.
Thank you, Esther.
Yeah, and it's great. Yeah, and I would also like to thank the Books Not Honored by Title project members who sat down and jointly put like the topics of the webinars together and made sure that the program became very interesting. And finally, I would like to say again that I am so grateful to those who have been in attendance both today and those who have followed us ever since November. I have seen that there are names here who have been like really following every webinar, and it's been so great to see these names pop up in the participant list and really have the feeling that there is someone out there even when it's a pandemic. So thank you so much. So this is the end of the webinar series, but it's not the end of the Books Not Only by Title project. If you want to meet us and keep up the conversation, Daniel Pikes in the book history section at the SBL has kindly organized a panel for us at the upcoming annual meeting of the SBL. And Mika Huvia has also set up a panel for us at the AGS meeting in December. So we look very much forward to seeing you there. And you can also, watch the recordings at YouTube again. And you can follow our Twitter tag, which is only by title. So thanks again, everyone, the panel, the fantastic panel, the project members and the audience. This has really, really been a blast. Thank you.
Thank you so much.